something just exploded in the royal world. And no, this isn't about Netflix contracts, fashion faux pas, or Meghan's latest Hollywood reinvention. This is something deeper, darker, the kind of revelation that doesn't just rock PR headlines, it cracks the very spine of the monarchy. Because this time, it's not about popularity polls or charity optics. It's about blood, about legitimacy, about the one thing the crown cannot survive without, absolute unshakable lineage. And the person lighting the match? Not a rogue tabloid, not a bitter ex-royal staffer, but Angela Levin, the veteran royal biographer, has ice in her voice and receipts in her back pocket. She didn't hint. She didn't dance around the edges. She went live on national television and dropped a bombshell so explosive, it left Buckingham Palace in stunned silence and Montecito in full-blown panic mode. She calmly, methodically, with the precision of a scalpel, suggested the unthinkable, that there may be serious, unanswered questions about Archie and Lilibet's legitimacy. And in one terrifying moment, the world shifted. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a constitutional crisis in the making. And what happened next would set fire to everything Harry and Meghan had spent years trying to protect. It started like any other royal segment. Angela Levin, the seasoned biographer known for her steel-trap memory and zero tolerance for fluff, seated in a modest studio chair, hands folded neatly, expression neutral. But the moment she opened her mouth, the temperature dropped. Then it detonated. Without flinching, without so much as a raised brow, Angela asked the question that no other royal commentator had ever dared to voice on air. Why have Harry and Meghan never followed a single one of the royal birth protocols? Why is there no hospital step photo? Why is there no signed medical bulletin? Why are there no official witnesses or attending physician statements? Why, unlike every royal mother before her, had Meghan seemingly erased every traditional marker that would confirm her children's place in the royal bloodline? For centuries, royal births have been treated like sacred state events. The hospital steps, the swaddled baby, the crowd of cameras, it's all part of the process. Not for publicity, but for protocol, transparency, legitimacy. The monarchy doesn't survive on sentiment. It survives on certainty. Bloodline is everything. And for the first time in modern royal history, that chain of certainty had a missing link. Angela didn't need theatrics. She didn't scream. She didn't accuse. Her words were quiet, almost surgical. And that's what made them lethal. In her measured tone, she outlined how the Sussexes sidestepped tradition entirely. No documented proof of birth, no clear timeline, conflicting reports about where Meghan gave birth, and the only visuals the public ever got, heavily filtered photos, odd baby bumps that appeared and disappeared like props, christenings held in secret, and statements that raised more questions than they answered. Angela's phrasing was devastating in its simplicity. In centuries of royal tradition, every birth has been documented with precision, and yet, for the first time, that transparency vanished. Why? The studio went silent. No pushback, no laughter, just stunned quiet. Because even the host, usually armed with a quick deflection or a cheeky defense, seemed caught off guard. It was the kind of moment that you feel in your gut, the kind where history splits in two. And outside that studio, the world reacted like a lit match had been dropped into a room full of gas. Within minutes, clips of Angela's statement were rocketing across social media. Twitter blew up with hashtags like Jash, royal cover-up, Jash, Angela exposes, and where are the records? Commentators on every platform, royalist or Republican, suddenly found themselves asking the same thing. What if she's right? Because Angela wasn't just speculating about PR strategy or media manipulation. She was challenging the very legitimacy of two royal children. Children who, under normal circumstances, would be in the direct line of succession. She wasn't gossiping. She was calling into question a legal chain that connects the British monarchy to centuries of unbroken rule. And the way she did it? Cold, precise, devastating. This wasn't tabloid chatter. This was a constitutional grenade tossed directly at the gates of Montecito. And as it landed, Meghan stayed silent. But Harry? Harry did the one thing guaranteed to make it all worse. And that's where it begins. Harry's nuclear reaction. The moment Angela Levin's words hit the airwaves, the internet lit up. But inside Montecito, it was something else entirely. Panic, rage, chaos. And at the center of it, Prince Harry, the once beloved spare to the throne, now pacing the marble floors of his California mansion like a man under siege. He could have done the logical thing, the simple thing, the obvious thing. Produced a birth certificate, released a medical bulletin, called the bluff. But Harry didn't do any of that. Instead, he went nuclear. Within hours of Angela's broadcast, his legal team was activated. Cease and desist letters began flying, fast, aggressive, and loaded with threats. Sources say the documents accused Angela of defamation, harassment, and deliberate attempts to incite public hysteria. The wording was sharp, the tone furious, and the demand was crystal clear. Retract, apologize, disappear. But here's the brutal irony. When you respond to a rumor with legal firepower instead of proof, you don't kill the story, you supercharge it. Angela hadn't said anything criminal. She'd simply asked a question millions had quietly whispered, but no one in mainstream media had dared to voice. And Harry? He responded like a man with something to hide. The public didn't see a father protecting his children. They saw a cornered celebrity threatening to sue everyone in sight. And just like that, sympathy evaporated. Suspicion took its place. Because here's the uncomfortable truth about the internet age. When you reach for lawyers before facts, the world assumes guilt. Harry could have dropped a single scanned document and ended the speculation overnight. Instead, he chose war, and war meant exposure. The legal threats triggered a frenzy. Journalists started digging. Bloggers analyzed old footage. Body language experts were wheeled back out like courtroom witnesses. People dissected photos, timelines, quotes, everything. And with each hour that passed without proof, the fire spread. Behind closed doors, even royal insiders, those who once loyally shielded him, were reportedly muttering the same thing. If there's nothing to hide, why won't he just prove it? But Harry didn't want logic. He wanted blood. He allegedly demanded that his team track down every platform that had shared Angela's segment and threatened lawsuits against them too. The goal was total erasure, not just of the video, but of the very question it raised. One insider said Harry was obsessed, calling emergency PR meetings at all hours, ranting about betrayal, and accusing unnamed enemies of orchestrating a coordinated smear campaign. And still, no documents, no timeline, no facts, just fury. Even Meghan reportedly urged caution, warning Harry that more legal threats would make things worse. But by then, he wasn't listening. He was in siege mode. And Meghan? She vanished from the public eye. No statements, no appearances, no show of unity, just silence, which made it all look even worse. Because when someone's being falsely accused, you usually see a united front. You see the couple, side by side, defiantly denying. Not this time. This time, Harry stood alone, wild-eyed, red-faced, and suing everyone in sight. It didn't look like control, it looked like desperation. And then came the backlash. Social media turned savage. Memes compared Harry's legal addiction to a toddler throwing tantrums. One viral tweet read, "Harry's suing everyone but showing nothing. That's not defense, it's deflection." Another, "Proof silences lies. Lawsuits only silence truth." He was being mocked, not defended. And for someone who has spent years trying to rebrand himself as a brave truth teller, that shift was brutal. Because if the public stops believing you stand for transparency, the entire foundation of your persona starts to rot. And Angela, she said nothing more. She didn't double down. She didn't clarify. She didn't even tweet. She just let Harry unravel, publicly and spectacularly. Because that's the cruel beauty of the trap she set. She asked the question. Harry gave the answer, with rage, threats, and silence where truth should have been. And while his lawyers were drawing up another cease and desist letter, Angela's silence said it all. She didn't need to prove anything. Harry already had. But Meghan's silence? That was even louder. And in will follow her vanishing act, and what it really said about loyalty, legacy, and self-preservation. While Harry fumed and the media frenzy reached a deafening pitch, Meghan Markle disappeared not just from the public eye, but from the entire battlefield. No Instagram posts, no carefully curated strolls, no podcast soundbites, no anonymous friends leaking quotes to People magazine, nothing. And that silence, it was deafening. Because when the legitimacy of your children is being questioned, publicly, globally, on primetime television, most mothers would charge into the spotlight to defend them. But Meghan didn't. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't release a statement. She didn't even make a symbolic appearance. She simply vanished, letting Harry flail in the fire alone. It didn't look like privacy. It looked like a retreat. Insiders say she stayed behind the Montecito walls, glued to her phone, calling legal teams, strategists, and PR experts, like her reputation depended on it, because it did. But she wasn't stepping up. She was calculating, watching, waiting, letting Harry take the bullets while she assessed whether it was even worth stepping into the fire. And this wasn't the first time. Meghan has always styled herself as the strategist, the brains behind the brand. Harry, the emotional one, has long been cast as her loyal foot soldier, charging into battle while she quietly manages the optics behind the curtain. But this time, the optics were turning on her. Because the moment Angela Levin dragged Archie and Lilibet into the spotlight, the illusion cracked. This wasn't just Harry's war anymore. It was theirs. And Meghan's silence no longer reads as poise. It read as an absence, as abandonment. And people noticed. Commentators began asking the same question over and over. Where is Meghan? If the claims were so baseless, so outrageous, where was the mother's fury? Where was the righteous indignation? Where was the protective lioness energy Meghan so often projected in interviews and documentaries? Instead, Harry looked like a man unraveling. and Meghan looked like someone watching from behind a two-way mirror, weighing her options. And that coldness, that distance, only fueled the fire. Because for years, Meghan has spoken about truth, transparency, and reclaiming her narrative. But now, with her entire family's legitimacy under siege, she wasn't reclaiming anything. She was silent, detached, invisible. According to one Montecito insider, Meghan's strategy was deliberate. She feared that inserting herself would only escalate the story, giving it more oxygen. She believed ignoring Angela Levin would starve the fire, but it didn't. It made her look guilty by omission, like she was hiding behind Harry, again. And the public turned on her fast. "She'll film a Netflix documentary about rescuing chickens," one commentator quipped. "But won't show up for her own kids' reputations?" Another tweeted, "Funny how she vanished just when the heat turned real." The backlash was sharp. Even former supporters began posting vague accountability messages and arch quotes about staying silent when it matters most. The same influencers who once hailed Meghan as a trailblazing icon were now quietly distancing themselves. And Harry? He was bearing the full weight alone. Multiple sources say he became increasingly paranoid, snapping at staff, holding late-night emergency calls with lawyers, and accusing friends of leaking to the press. And Meghan? She let him. She watched. It didn't look like solidarity. It looked like self-preservation. Because in Meghan's world, image is currency, and aligning too closely with Harry's meltdown could bankrupt her brand. She wasn't going down with him. She was floating above it, calculating whether to intervene or let him sink. Her silence wasn't loyalty. It was a strategy. And that's what made it so chilling. Because when everything exploded, when your family's very place in the monarchy is questioned, when your children's identities are being dissected on morning TV, and you still choose silence, that's not just absence, that's a message. And what that silence triggered next wasn't just PR fallout. It was a constitutional crisis in the making. Stay with me, because it's where it all unravels. The bloodline question that could collapse the crown. This wasn't gossip anymore. This wasn't about fashion, feuds, or who made who cry over flower girl dresses. This was about blood. And in the royal world, that's everything. Angela Levin didn't just throw shade on Meghan's maternity wardrobe or poke holes in Harry's media war. She cracked open the one thing the monarchy cannot afford to leave to speculation: the bloodline, the sacred chain of succession, the centuries-old framework that decides who gets to wear the crown and who doesn't. And for the first time in modern history, that framework was under threat. Because if Angela Levin was even partially right, if Archie and Lilibet's births were undocumented, unverifiable, or worse, manipulated, then the ripple effect wasn't just scandalous, it was constitutional. The kind of crisis that doesn't just spark headlines, it threatens the very future of the monarchy itself. Let's be clear, royal succession isn't ceremonial fluff. It's hard-coded into British law. Only biological children of a royal heir, born within lawful marriage and with traceable proof, are eligible to inherit royal titles and positions in the line of succession. The crown depends on certainty, not an assumption, not PR optics, proof. And that's what made Levin's questions so incendiary. Because she wasn't asking whether Meghan deserved privacy, she was asking whether two children in the royal line even qualified to be there under the rules of the monarchy itself. And once that question was aired, live on national TV, there was no putting the genie back in the bottle. Suddenly, the whisper campaigns turned into newsroom discussions. Legal scholars began weighing in. Opinion pieces in major outlets asked whether royal births could be reviewed retroactively if proper protocol had been bypassed. The term succession audit entered the mainstream lexicon. And for a family built entirely on legacy, tradition, and legal precision, that was DEFCON 1. What Angela Levin had done, quietly, methodically, was spark a wildfire of constitutional doubt. And the more Harry raged, the more serious the conversation became. Because now the question wasn't just, is Angela exaggerating? It was, why is there no proof? Why were there no hospital photos, as there were for every other royal baby? Why were Meghan's birth locations never confirmed by the palace? Why were medical bulletins, a royal requirement for generations, skipped? Why was everything about these births wrapped in secrecy, misdirection, and confusion? And then came the truly dangerous whispers from within the legal community. If it ever turned out, even hypothetically, that surrogacy or adoption were involved, without formal declaration or transparency, could Archie and Lilibet legally retain their royal titles? Could they remain in the line of succession? That's not tabloid drama. That's constitutional chaos. Because if a future monarch's children were found to be outside the legal bounds of succession, the implications would be nuclear. Every title, every role, every constitutional privilege granted to them would be invalid. And worse, every other royal who had been bumped further down the line to make space for them could, theoretically, have a claim to challenge the system. Let that sink in. A single crack in the bloodline threatens to collapse everything, and the palace knew it. Insiders say that behind the scenes, senior aides were quietly reviewing what documentation, if any, existed. There was no public comment, of course. There never is. But the silence from Buckingham Palace was strategic and chilling, because this time they weren't rushing to Harry and Meghan's defense. No firm statements about unwavering support, no denials, no press releases reinforcing the children's legitimacy. Nothing. And that silence, that was the sound of the royal machine choosing to watch from a distance, just in case the cracks turned into a chasm. Meanwhile, Harry was spiraling. Meghan was still silent. And Angela Levin? She'd already moved on to her next interview, calmly repeating the question that now haunted the royal establishment. If everything was done correctly, where's the evidence? That single question had turned a PR problem into a constitutional reckoning. And now, there were only two paths forward: produce the proof and silence the fire, or let it burn all the way to the crown. And Harry? He was still throwing lawsuits like gasoline. But Angela hadn't said her last word yet, because she comes back swinging. And this time, she wasn't just hinting. She was naming names. Angela Levin didn't blink. While Harry launched legal threats like a man possessed, and Meghan disappeared behind palace-sized walls of silence, Angela did the unthinkable. She doubled down. She didn't retreat. She didn't soften. She didn't clarify. She escalated. Days after her first interview shattered the royal echo chamber, Angela returned to the airwaves with the same icy calm and deliberate tone that had made her first appearance so devastating. But this time, she came with details. She leaned into the firestorm like someone completely unafraid of the flames. And with her signature unnerving composure, she dropped another match. Not only was Harry allegedly pursuing secret legal action against multiple media outlets, he was also, according to her long-standing sources, trying to suppress internal communications that could blow holes in his carefully curated narrative. She didn't shout. She didn't sensationalize. She simply said, "It appears Prince Harry is trying to rewrite history through the courts." That single sentence sent the media machine into overdrive. Within minutes, Twitter timelines flooded. TikTok edits dissected her interview frame by frame. Instagram reels zoomed in on Angela's face, capturing the subtle smirk she gave as she delivered her line, a smirk that read like a dare. The hashtags lit up again. Anishi Harry hiding. Yani. Angela exposes part 2. Anyai Montecito meltdown. And for the first time, even neutral commentators, the ones who had long played it safe, long avoided royal controversy, began asking uncomfortable questions out loud. Because if Harry was trying to suppress documents, then everything changed. This wasn't about reputation anymore. It was about a cover-up. And Angela had just flipped the narrative like a switch. In an interview on GB News, she went even further. When asked if she feared retaliation, she looked directly into the camera and said, "If Harry thinks suing everyone will silence the truth, he's mistaken. All it does is make people wonder what he's trying so hard to hide." That line went nuclear. It reframed the entire situation in one brutal stroke. Harry was no longer the victim of tabloid cruelty. He was now the aggressor, allegedly waging legal war not to defend his family, but to bury the truth. Suddenly, his lawsuits didn't look righteous. They looked sinister, even more damning. Angela named the law firm, casually, calmly, on air. She mentioned the quiet, high-powered legal team she claimed was handling Harry's so-called reputation restoration campaign. And the moment she did, social media sleuths went digging. Within hours, screenshots of supposed filings, blurry images of legal letters, and unverified leaks exploded online. People weren't asking if it was true anymore. They were asking how deep it went. And that's when the tide truly turned. Because Angela Levin didn't just have public opinion on her side, she now had the scent of truth in the air. Truth that Harry seemed determined to suffocate under piles of legal paperwork. But each time he threatened, she gained more power. Each legal strike made her look braver. Each denial made her look more informed. And she knew it. While Harry's team reportedly scrambled to send warnings to news outlets amplifying her claims, Angela booked more interviews. Primetime, print, podcasts. Her book sales soared. Her quotes dominated headlines. She had become the most talked about royal commentator on earth, and Harry's greatest PR nightmare. Insiders say Harry lost it. Furious, he allegedly ordered his team to shut her down, accusing friends of leaking, threatening to cut off anyone who didn't publicly defend him. Meghan, according to Montecito sources, was pleading with him to stay calm, warning that every aggressive move only made Angela stronger. But Harry was past reason, past strategy. He wanted revenge. He wanted her silenced. But here's the catch, and Angela knew it. She hadn't broken any laws. She hadn't published confidential documents. She hadn't leaked classified information. She had simply spoken about what she knew, using language careful enough to stay just outside the reach of a libel suit. And that, right there, was the brilliance. Because for Harry to sue her directly, he'd have to expose the very things she was hinting at. He'd have to open the legal doors she was quietly knocking on. And the moment he did, discovery, testimony, depositions, documents, the very secrets he'd spent years hiding, could spill into the public domain. Angela had built a trap, and Harry had walked into it with his eyes wide shut. It wasn't just strategy, it was surgical. And while he raged behind closed doors, while Montecito spun in crisis mode, while lawyers debated how to silence a woman who'd said just enough, but not too much, Angela was sipping tea, giving interviews, and smiling with grandmotherly charm. Because she knew something Harry hadn't realized yet. She didn't have to prove him guilty. She just had to make the world wonder. As Angela Levin's accusations echoed across headlines and social media feeds, all eyes turned to Buckingham Palace. Would the firm step in? Would Charles issue a rare statement? Would William, the heir apparent, speak out to defend his brother's children? But the answer was a cold, calculated no. Silence. Total and absolute. No denials, no damage control. No royal spokesperson wheeled out in front of the cameras to clarify the birth records or soothe public anxiety. The palace didn't even leak a back-channel message to the press, as it so often does when scandal circles its gates. And that silence spoke louder than any press release ever could. Because in royal circles, silence is never an accident. It's a strategy. And in this case, it was deafening. According to insiders, the mood behind palace walls was not one of panic, but relief. Privately, sources claim, King Charles had long harbored suspicions about Harry's off-the-record legal antics and public contradictions. He'd allegedly grown weary of being blindsided by Harry's lawsuits, press interviews, and Netflix soundbites. William, too, was said to be done playing the peacemaker. And when Angela Levin ignited the succession debate, the palace didn't panic. They let Harry burn. One insider told The Telegraph in hushed tones, "He made this mess. Let him clean it up." Another reportedly said, "No more lifeboats, no more cover." The monarchy was cutting him loose, and the media, sensing blood in the water, they didn't hesitate. British tabloids sharpened their knives with glee. Even previously sympathetic publications began to shift tone, no longer casting Harry as the wounded prince, but as a man unraveling under the weight of his own lies. The Daily Mail splashed a brutal headline across its front page, "Royal Hypocrisy Exposed." The Times ran a searing editorial questioning whether Harry's obsession with privacy had morphed into something darker, an addiction to secrecy that borders on paranoia. The Guardian, usually cautious, couldn't resist. One columnist wrote, "You can't demand transparency from your family while hiding your own truths behind litigation." The dominoes were falling, and not just in the UK. Across the Atlantic, American media outlets began joining the pile-on. Good Morning America opened a segment with the headline, "Prince Harry, suing everyone, proving nothing." On late-night television, the gloves came off. Comedians mocked his legal threats, comparing him to a royal Karen. One even joked, "At this point, Harry's lawyers deserve their own Netflix show." Brutal. The image Harry had so carefully cultivated, a principled, wronged man taking on the system, was dissolving before his eyes. And what replaced it? A caricature, a meme. A man who couldn't take the heat, yet kept throwing fire. And Meghan, still silent. That absence only fueled the media's appetite. Paparazzi camped outside Montecito. Tabloids published speculative pieces with headlines like, "Where's Meghan now?" and "Why is she letting Harry drown alone?" PR experts were trotted out to analyze the optics. Body language specialists reviewed old interviews for signs of deception. It was a frenzy. And still, Buckingham Palace said nothing. They didn't have to, because the real damage wasn't coming from them. It was coming from the vacuum they left behind. The palace understood something Harry didn't. Sometimes silence is the sharpest dagger. While he spiraled, shouted, and sued, the monarchy stayed still, regal, unshaken. And that contrast made him look worse. One commentator on Sky News summed it up in a single line, "While the crown holds its silence, Harry keeps digging his own grave." And dig he did. Even some of Harry's former allies in the media began to walk away. Journalists who once defended him now questioned his motives. Influencers who had posted in support of Archie began quietly unfollowing the Sussex's accounts. Brand partners reportedly asked for reassurance as rumors swirled that more revelations were coming. Angela Levin had done more than raise a question. She'd shifted the tone of the entire global conversation. And with each passing hour, the palace's silence became more powerful, more damning, more final. Because for the first time, Harry wasn't just outside the royal circle. He was on the other side of the gate, pounding on the door, while the monarchy watched from the balcony. And behind him, a mob of journalists, lawyers, commentators, and digital sleuths, all demanding one thing: proof. Proof he didn't seem able or willing to give. While Harry's fury blazed across headlines and memes like a wildfire, Meghan Markle was caught in a different kind of storm. One she couldn't control with a smiling interview, a flattering photoshoot, or a carefully crafted statement from a close friend. Behind the gates of their Montecito mansion, sources say Meghan was in crisis mode. And for once, the script wasn't hers to write. According to insiders close to the Sussex circle, Meghan's panic set in the moment she realized the backlash wasn't just targeting Harry, it was dragging down the brand. And for Meghan, the brand was everything. It was the foundation of their Netflix deals, Spotify exclusives, magazine covers, and lifestyle dreams. It was the house of carefully curated victimhood, emotional truth-telling, and California reinvention they had built together. And Angela Levin's revelations were taking a sledgehammer to it. Gone were the sympathetic headlines. In their place came savage questions. Why did Meghan skip royal birth traditions? Where's the medical evidence? Why the secrecy if there's nothing to hide? Questions that weren't just inconvenient. They were dangerous. Because when you build a public identity on transparency and authenticity, the moment people sense you're hiding something, it all begins to collapse. PR consultants were called, several of them reportedly on back-to-back Zooms. Montecito neighbors whispered to the press that Meghan was on the phone constantly, pacing through their estate, speaking in frantic tones. One insider leaked that she told a communications advisor, "We cannot let her destroy the brand like this. Harry looks unhinged." That word, brand, kept surfacing. Because this wasn't just a family emergency, it was a commercial one. Netflix executives were said to be closely monitoring the situation. One anonymous source at the streaming giant allegedly told a British tabloid, "We didn't invest in a scandal. We invested in a story. And if that story turns out to be built on sand, we've got a problem." Suddenly, Meghan was no longer in control of the narrative. The media, the palace, the public, they were writing it for her, and she was stuck playing defense. But here's what made it worse. Her usual tools weren't working. She couldn't charm her way out of this, couldn't post an empowering quote, couldn't launch a new lifestyle initiative, or leak a baby photo to shift the mood. Every move risked looking like a distraction, a deflection. And the moment she spoke, she'd risk confirming Angela's central claim, that something is being hidden. So she said nothing. And the silence was misread as guilt. Even as Harry was reportedly spiraling, accusing staff of leaking, demanding forensic phone checks, pacing the mansion at 3 a.m., Meghan remained conspicuously absent. No interviews, no appearances, no Instagram activity, just silence. But behind the scenes, she was scrambling. Insiders claimed she was furiously trying to figure out whether Angela Levin could be sued, demanding legal opinions on whether her statements constituted defamation. Lawyers allegedly warned her of the obvious. Angela hadn't leaked classified documents. She hadn't violated confidentiality. She had spoken carefully. And dragging her into court might backfire by forcing Harry and Meghan to disclose the very documentation they'd been avoiding for years. It was a trap, and Meghan knew it. She was boxed in, strategically, legally, publicly. Any aggressive move would look like a cover-up. Any soft rebuttal would look like a half admission. And silence? Silence was already painting her as the queen of spin, caught without a script. And worse, the public was beginning to mock. Influencers who once parroted her empowerment slogans were now posting cryptic accountability quotes clearly aimed at her. Comment sections on Meghan-friendly platforms turned hostile, demanding answers. Hashtags like Jacques Meghan, Where Are You, and Ashushunsh brand Sussex collapse trended. Even fashion bloggers were turning away, calling her radioactive for partnerships. This wasn't just a PR dip, it was a free fall, and it sent Meghan into full containment mode. One former friend reportedly told a magazine that Meghan was devastated by how quickly public support evaporated, saying, "She thought her silence would be seen as grace under fire, but instead people think she's hiding. And she's never felt this exposed before." Meghan, who once claimed to be the most trolled person on the planet, now found herself in the middle of a scandal with no clear villain to point to. Because the villain, in the eyes of many, was no longer the press or the palace, it was her. And while she tried to hold the pieces together behind closed doors, Harry was unraveling in public. It was a losing game on every front. The brand was hemorrhaging goodwill. The public was demanding receipts. The press was circling like sharks. And Meghan? She was trapped in a silence she couldn't afford to break. There was a time, not long ago, when Prince Harry was seen as the wounded prince, the rebel son who had escaped the cold machinery of the monarchy in search of healing and freedom. People cried with him during his Oprah confessionals. They cheered when he denounced the tabloid vultures. He was flawed, yes, but relatable. Tragic, sympathetic. But that chapter is over because something changed in the public's eye. Something irreversible. And it wasn't subtle. Harry didn't just lose control of the narrative. He became a punchline. The fatal shift began when Angela Levin did what even the nastiest tabloids had always stopped short of. She dragged Archie and Lilibet directly into the eye of the storm. On a live radio appearance, she hinted, casually, coolly, devastatingly, that if Harry's rumored secret lawsuit failed, it could result in the re-examination of his children's royal titles. Their very legitimacy could be up for legal debate. Boom, the nuclear moment. Even those who had been cautiously following the drama took a sharp breath. This wasn't just palace games or media wars anymore. This was about children, about their place in the monarchy, about whether they should have even been granted titles at all. And within minutes, social media turned savage. Headlines screamed, "Angela Levin hints at title crisis for Archie and Lilibet." Could the Sussex children be removed from the line of succession? Levin drops the bomb. Harry can't ignore. The internet did what it does best. It weaponized the moment. One viral tweet read, "Harry wanted a fairy tale. Angela gave him a courtroom drama." Another, "If you've got nothing to hide, why do your lawyers work overtime?" Meme after meme rolled out. Harry under a desk while Angela hovers above with a stack of legal files. Harry photoshopped as a toddler in a courtroom yelling, "I'll sue!" And the most brutal one of all, a fake movie poster, Prince of Panic, based on a true insecurity. The tragic prince had officially become a joke. Even late-night comedians, who once tiptoed around royal drama, joined in. One quipped, "At this point, Angela Levin should be wearing the crown. She's running the monarchy's PR." Another joked, "Harry's lawyers are working harder than Meghan's podcast team ever did." Brutal, unrelenting, and not at all how Harry wanted to be seen. Because for someone as obsessed with image as Harry has become, ridicule is worse than hate. Hate can be spun into victimhood, but mockery? That's fatal. It strips away dignity. It erodes credibility. And once the public starts laughing at you, it's almost impossible to win them back. And Meghan? Sources say she lost it. According to a neighbor who spoke anonymously to the press, Meghan allegedly threw her phone across the room when she saw the headlines about the children's titles. She reportedly screamed at an advisor, "She's dragging the kids into this. This is war." Lawyers were immediately contacted, defamation suits were discussed, and cease and desist letters were drafted like wildfire. But there was a problem. Angela hadn't stated anything as fact. She hinted, speculated, suggested, which meant she couldn't be sued. Not without Harry and Meghan opening the very legal doors they'd spent years bolting shut. It was a classic checkmate. Angela had crossed the line without breaking the law, and Meghan was paralyzed. Behind the scenes, PR consultants reportedly urged Meghan to go public, to speak out, to at least show her face. But she refused. The optics were too volatile. The questions are too dangerous. And every lawyer she called repeated the same chilling warning. If you try to silence her in court, you may end up proving her right. Because the moment Meghan or Harry sued, discovery would begin. That means emails, contracts, birth documentation, medical records. All are subject to subpoenas. All are potentially accessible to the public. It wasn't just risky, it was suicidal. And so they did nothing. They hid. While Angela Levin dominated airwaves, smiling serenely as she dropped veiled threats of more to come. At the same time, the tabloids ran wild with theories and legal speculation. At the same time, meme accounts posted footage of Harry pacing like a madman overlaid with circus music. The brand was crumbling. The mystique was gone. The sympathy had bled dry. And all that remained was a man with a title and no power, a woman with strategy but no leverage, and a pair of children suddenly dragged into a royal identity crisis, not of their making. Angela Levin hadn't just embarrassed Harry, she'd deconstructed him, piece by piece, lawsuit by lawsuit, until all that was left was a walking contradiction. The privacy-obsessed prince who won't stop suing people into silence. And as Meghan tried to salvage what was left of their image, she faced a harsh truth. One even her harshest critics had never said out loud until now. She wasn't in control anymore. The narrative had slipped. The empire was bleeding. And the very thing she had fought to protect, the children's place in royal history, was now the center of the storm. There are unwritten rules in royal reporting. Lines you don't cross, no matter how cutthroat the headlines get. Chief among them? You do not drag royal children into scandal. Not directly. Not by name. Not like this. But Angela Levin didn't flinch. She walked straight across that line and detonated the one subject that even the most vicious tabloids had tiptoed around for years. Archie and Lilibet's right to their royal titles. In a now infamous radio appearance, Angela delivered her most chilling message yet. Not with rage or theatrics, but with a steady, almost grandmotherly smile. If the legal filings Harry is preparing fail, the fallout could extend to his children's titles. Just like that, the gloves were off. The implication was razor sharp, that the legitimacy of Harry and Meghan's children, their very place in the royal bloodline, might not withstand legal scrutiny. And in a monarchy built on inheritance, order, and blood, those words weren't just controversial, they were nuclear. The response was instant and savage. Within minutes, hashtags like non-charged title crisis, royal bloodline bombshell, and Levin goes, there were trending across every major platform. Commentators who had previously steered clear of the legitimacy debate suddenly flooded YouTube and news panels, cautiously but loudly, asking the same questions Angela had implied. What if the royal family can't prove Archie and Lilibet meet the constitutional requirements for succession? What happens if the palace is forced to acknowledge a lack of documentation? Could the titles be stripped? Could Parliament get involved? Suddenly, the Sussexes weren't just facing media backlash. They were staring down a constitutional nightmare. And Meghan? She was done playing calmly. Sources inside Montecito told tabloids that Meghan was in full meltdown mode. Not frustrated, not flustered, furious. According to one anonymous insider, she allegedly screamed at their lawyers over Zoom, demanding to know, how the hell is she allowed to say that? But the legal team had no answers she wanted to hear. Angela Levin hadn't declared anything as fact. She had floated a possibility, framed a hypothetical, a carefully calculated what-if, legally bulletproof, morally devastating. And Meghan knew it. She wanted to sue. She wanted Angela off the air. She wanted every outlet that repeated the claim dragged into court. But every single legal advisor came back with the same haunting advice. If you file, you open the door. If you open the door, everything comes out. It was the worst-case scenario. Their own lawsuit could force them to submit the very documents they've kept hidden. Birth records, hospital logs, christening certificates, any traceable confirmation of traditional royal protocol. And once those documents were public, there'd be no more spinning, no more sources say. Just a hard legal fact, or absence of it. Which is why, in the darkest twist yet, Meghan and Harry were paralyzed. They couldn't speak without risking more questions. They couldn't sue without risking total exposure. And they couldn't ignore it, because now the children were the story. And the court of public opinion? It was relentless. Comment sections turned cruel. So this was the modern monarchy they promised? One user wrote. A fog of lawsuits and no birth certificates? Another. If they cared about their kids, they'd end this now. But they can't, because maybe Angela's right. Even longtime supporters began to shift. Influencers who had praised Meghan's motherhood journey quietly deleted old posts. Parenting blogs that once spotlighted her as a role model went silent. The energy had changed. Because there's a difference between being controversial and being radioactive. And Meghan? She was glowing. Behind the scenes, a full-blown brand crisis was brewing. Montecito insiders claimed that brand consultants were pulling out of upcoming campaigns. One fashion line allegedly paused a Meghan-centered deal due to ongoing reputational concerns. Translation? No one wanted to bet on a duchess tangled in a scandal about her children's place in the crown. And the palace? Still dead silent. Not a single word defending Archie and Lilibet. No firm statement. No symbolic gesture. Nothing. That silence was thunderous. It told the public one thing. They're letting Harry and Meghan hang. And that stung more than the headlines. And because for all their rebellion, all their independence, the Sussexes had built their brand around the idea that they were still royal, still connected, still entitled. But now, even that was unraveling. And as Meghan tried to hold the walls from collapsing around her, Harry reached his breaking point. He didn't want caution. He didn't want a strategy. He wanted revenge. And what he did next was the most catastrophic move of his life. While Prince Harry raged, while Meghan spiraled behind Montecito's manicured hedges, and while the entire world speculated about bloodlines, lawsuits, and titles, Angela Levin did something that sealed her legacy, not just as a royal commentator, but as the woman who cracked the Sussex myth wide open. She didn't flinch. She didn't backpedal, apologize, or clarify. She didn't release a statement or go dark on social media. Instead, Angela doubled down with poise, composure, and a smile that could cut through steel. She went back on the air, again and again and again. And each time, she didn't just survive the firestorm, she owned it. While Harry's team scrambled to control the chaos, Angela's voice became the voice. She wasn't ranting, she wasn't guessing. She was speaking with the cold precision of someone who knew exactly how far she could go without overstepping. She said just enough to make Harry squirm, and not enough to be sued. It was a masterclass in narrative warfare. And Harry walked right into her trap. Because when Harry finally snapped, when he ordered his legal team to go full scorched earth and sue Angela Levin directly, it was already too late. The perception war had been lost. Angela didn't need to win in court. She had already won in the court of public opinion. By suing her, Harry didn't silence the questions. He confirmed them. The press went wild. Prince Harry declares war on Angela Levin. Legal Armageddon, the battle for bloodline truth. Angela Levin, the woman who dared to ask what no one else would. Every headline was a victory for her. Every article dragged Harry deeper into the hole. And every meme made him look more desperate. Even worse, the lawsuit meant discovery. By suing Angela, Harry opened the legal door she had been gently knocking on for months. Now, documents could be subpoenaed. Records could be examined. Internal communications could be made public. And Angela? She just sat back and watched the machine eat itself alive. Behind the scenes, Meghan was reportedly furious. According to Montecito insiders, she warned Harry repeatedly not to go after Angela directly. She saw the trap. She understood the optics. But Harry didn't care. He wanted revenge. He wanted headlines that said he was taking back control. Instead, the headlines said something else entirely. They said Angela Levin had outplayed a prince. And while Harry's legal team scrambled, while aides prepared for the worst, while former palace officials were quietly lawyered up, Angela thrived. Her book sales exploded. She became the most sought-after commentator on royal affairs, commanding primetime slots and 5-figure appearance fees. Her social media exploded. Her interviews went viral. She became, quite literally, the face of Harry's downfall, and she wore it like a crown. Every time Harry's team issued a denial, Angela calmly responded with a shrug and a challenge. If it's not true, prove it. And that's what made it devastating. Because Harry couldn't. Not without exposing the very truths he'd spent years burying. Not without risking his children's status, his marriage's stability, his media contracts, and his carefully built victim narrative. He was trapped, and Angela was thriving in the chaos. Insiders say Harry became increasingly erratic, holding crisis calls at all hours, demanding total phone lockdown from staff, and accusing friends of betrayal. One source claimed he even demanded that former aides publicly defend him, or be cut off entirely. And Meghan? She went into full shutdown mode. Sources say she called her publicists daily, reviewing every sentence that went out, vetting every post, panicking about the optics. And still, nothing stopped the bleeding. Because Angela had done something that even the palace never dared. She exposed the fragility of the Sussex empire. She didn't just ask whether the children's births were properly documented, she questioned the foundation. And in doing so, she made the public realize that everything Harry and Meghan had built could be swept away by one unsealed document. And worst of all, she made them laugh at him. That was the fatal blow. The shift from sympathy to satire, from wounded royal to walking punchline. Harry wasn't seen as a hero anymore. He was a meme, a parody, the Prince of Panic, the man suing the world to protect a story that no longer holds water. And as the Sussex brand hemorrhaged credibility, Angela basked in the spotlight, not as a villain, but as the unlikely truth-teller. She didn't need palace backing. She didn't need tabloid spin. She just asked the one question no one else dared. Where's the proof? And 5 years of PR, legal threats, and brand building came crashing down under the weight of silence. But the most terrifying part? Angela wasn't finished. In the final seconds of a chilling interview, she leaned forward, looked directly into the camera, and said, "And this is just the beginning." And in the final chapter, we face the ultimate endgame. Parliament whispers, royal silence, and the looming question. Could Angela's final reveal erase Harry's legacy forever? Angela Levin didn't fire a shot. She lit a fuse. What began as a single televised question, a calm inquiry about royal birth protocol, has now unraveled into one of the most dangerous crises the British monarchy has faced in a generation. Not because it exposed a lie, but because it exposed a gap, a space where certainty should have been, where documents should have existed, where tradition should have anchored truth. Instead, there was silence, a void. And in the world of royalty, especially in the world of succession, silence is as damning as a confession. Prince Harry, once seen as the bold breaker of chains, has now become a cautionary tale. The prince who tried to rewrite his legacy through lawsuits, the husband who couldn't protect the one thing that gave his children power, their unquestionable place in the royal line, and the man who, in his obsession with control, ended up losing everything. Meghan Markle, strategist, performer, image architect, now stands in the wreckage of a brand she helped build brick by brick, only to watch it crumble under the weight of a single unanswered question. Her silence was meant to be sophisticated. Instead, it read as hollow. Her vanishing act, once seen as regal restraint, now feels like a calculated escape. And Angela? She doesn't need to speak anymore. The world is doing it for her. Legal experts are now openly discussing the unthinkable. What happens if Parliament gets involved? Could a private legal battle lead to a public stripping of royal titles? Could the crown, out of necessity, not cruelty, be forced to sever Archie and Lilibet's ties to the throne for the sake of constitutional integrity? The whispers have already started. Inside Parliament, inside press rooms, inside the palace, and the firm, still silent. Which says more than words ever could. Because when the monarchy goes mute, it isn't confused, it's calculating. Angela Levin didn't just survive the storm, she directed it. She took a scalpel to the Sussex mythos, removed the sentimentality, and forced the world to confront the cold, legal, blood-bound rules that govern the House of Windsor. And in doing so, she forced Harry into a corner he may never crawl out of. He thought the war was over. He thought he had escaped. But what he didn't realize was that royalty isn't a feeling, it's a framework. And if you strip away the paperwork, the protocol, the proof, you're not royalty anymore. You're just a man in a mansion, suing shadows. And the shadow chasing Harry now? It's not Angela Levin. It's the truth. It's coming. And when it arrives, it won't knock. It'll crown someone else. Because this wasn't the end of a story. This was just the beginning.